The scene emerges with unsettling clarity, frozen in a moment where struggle and silence coexist. A vast, barren landscape stretches into the distance, patterned with rigid fields and distant walls that seem impossibly far away, as though the world itself has retreated from what is happening in the foreground. The ground is dry, pale, and unforgiving. It carries no softness, no life, no warmth. The sky rests heavy above it, muted and indifferent, as if the air refuses to intervene. And in the center of this stillness, a confrontation holds itself perfectly still, as though time has stopped at the moment just before something irreversible. A pale horse rears back on its hind legs, its muscles tensed, its head tilted slightly away from the danger before it. The rider leans forward, held in a narrow and delicate balance between the fear of retreat and the need to advance. His armor gleams weakly where the light touches it, but most of his body disappears into restrained shadow. His hands grip the spear with rigid precision, arms extended, shoulders fixed in measured control. He does not strike wildly, he does not lunge with fury. His attack is careful, almost reluctant, as if violence has become a duty he would rather not fulfill. Opposite him, the creature rises from the earth in a twisted arc of scales and sinew. Its body coils like a serpent bound to the ground by its own weight. The wings stretch from its back in jagged angles, thin and fragile, yet strangely menacing, as if they were never meant for flight, only for display. Its mouth opens into a dark, cavernous void lined with sharp, uneven teeth. The eyes burn with an expression that does not feel purely monstrous. Instead, they hold a flicker of something closer to suffering, something trapped between rage and desperation. The spear pierces its mouth, and yet its body continues to curl forward, refusing surrender even in the moment of defeat. To the side, standing apart from the conflict, a woman watches in still reverence. Her hands are folded against her chest, fingers pressed together, her body draped in a long red garment that flows downward like a quiet river of fabric. Her face carries no expression of fear or shock. Instead, there is a strange resignation in her gaze, as if she has seen too much already, as if this scene is not surprising but inevitable. She stands neither victor nor victim, suspended in a role she cannot escape, witness, sacrifice, or survivor. The space between them feels heavy, like a breath held too long. There is no movement in the background. No wind stirs the fields or touches the stone walls. The ground does not shift beneath the horse's hooves. The painting captures the world at the exact threshold between action and consequence. The spear is already embedded. The dragon has already been struck. And yet the struggle remains unfinished, as if the moment resists its own completion. The longer your eyes rest on the figures, the more the silence becomes unsettling. The violence here does not explode outward. It whispers, restrained, controlled, almost ceremonial. The spear enters with precision, not aggression. The horse recoils not in triumph, but in unease. The creature's body twists, not only in pain, but in some deeper recognition that its role in this world has already been sealed long before the weapon reached it. You begin to feel something beneath the narrative surface, something that presses slowly against the edges of the scene. The confrontation does not feel like a conquest born from courage. It feels like a ritual, as if each figure already knows where they are meant to stand, what gesture they must perform, what fate they must fulfill. The woman watches, the creature thrashes, the rider advances, and none of them look free. There is unease in the hero's posture. His lance extends straight and unwavering, but his body leans with an uncertainty that lingers beneath the armor. His face remains calm, almost blank, as though he has learned to numb whatever emotion might interfere with what must be done. His hand grips the spear so tightly that the tension travels up through his arms, into his shoulders, across his back. The hero does not look like a symbol of divine victory. He looks like someone holding himself together through sheer force of will. The dragon, monstrous yet strangely familiar in its suffering, becomes something more than a simple embodiment of evil. There is fear in its open mouth, resistance in its twisting movement, and a desperate refusal to collapse into the role assigned to it. Its wings curl backward, not in power, but in fragility. The creature does not tower over its opponent. It does not dominate the scene. Instead, it bends inward, cornered, trapped, as if it already understands that it has been placed here to lose. And somewhere between the two, the woman stands untouched, yet fundamentally bound to the struggle. Her stillness carries a weight deeper than fear. It feels like acceptance. Her hands fold, not in prayer for deliverance, but in surrender to a reality larger than herself. She does not run, she does not cry out, she endures, and in that endurance lies something hauntingly quiet. Only after this silence settles into you does the scene reveal its identity. This is St. George and the Dragon, a moment of legend painted not as a triumphal spectacle, but as psychological tension suspended in stillness. The story of a hero rescuing a maiden from a monster has been retold through the centuries, but here it has been stripped of glory and thunder. Instead, it reveals how frail victory can appear when placed under the weight of reality. The painting reflects a world where moral certainty dissolves under observation. The hero does not shine with divine righteousness. The dragon does not embody pure evil. The maiden does not stand as a romantic symbol. Each figure becomes a fragment of human experience. Fear, duty, vulnerability, resistance, sacrifice, all converging in a single unmoving instant. And as you continue to watch, the line between myth and psyche begins to blur. The spear is no longer just a weapon. It becomes a question. The dragon is no longer merely a beast. It becomes the embodiment of something buried and feared. The rider is no longer a legend. He becomes a figure caught between obligation and doubt. And the woman, silent and composed, becomes a witness to the cost of both action and survival. The painting does not invite you to celebrate the victory unfolding before you. It invites you to feel the weight of it. It invites you to notice how fragile the hero's resolve appears beneath the armor, how exposed the dragon looks in its final resistance, how solitary the woman stands in her quiet endurance. It invites you to recognize that triumph, when stripped of fantasy, reveals not glory, but cost. And that cost hovers in the air like something unspoken, something that will not disappear even when the spear finishes its path, and the struggle finally collapses into its inevitable end. The longer the gaze lingers on the confrontation, the more the image begins to detach from legend and drift towards something inward and unspoken. The moment no longer feels like a story of heroism unfolding on distant ground, but like a quiet struggle taking place within the human mind itself. The figures remain locked in their poses, yet the emotional weight continues to deepen, expanding through the silence like a slow-moving tide. The spear holds steady inside the creature's open mouth. The horse remains poised in tense recoil. The woman stands rooted in stillness. And yet something continues to move, not on the surface, but beneath it. The struggle does not seem to belong only to the figures on the canvas. It begins to feel personal, strangely familiar. The dragon's twisting body carries the shape of resistance we recognize in ourselves. The parts of us that refuse to be subdued even when cornered, the fears and impulses that claw their way upward despite every attempt to restrain them. There is desperation in its posture, a refusal to vanish quietly. Its body arches not only in pain, but in an instinctual attempt to remain seen, to remain present, even in defeat. It is not simply a monster being conquered, it is a side of human nature that refuses erasure. The rider, rigid inside his armor, becomes less of a savior and more of a figure bound to expectation. His spear does not strike with passion, but with the weight of obligation. The moment feels like something imposed upon him, a role inherited rather than chosen. His control is precise, his movement restrained, yet beneath that restraint is a quiet tension. The awareness that he must continue forward even if he does not fully belong to the act he performs. His face remains composed, not because he is fearless, but because fear has no place in the mask he must wear. Between the two, the woman continues to stand in silence. Her hands remain clasped against her chest, but the gesture no longer reads as prayer. It feels like containment, as if she is holding something inside herself so it does not fracture outward. She does not celebrate the rescue. She does not plead for mercy. Her presence carries the weight of someone who understands that no matter how this moment ends, something has already been lost. She represents the cost that neither victory nor defeat can erase. The scene reveals itself not as a triumph of good over evil, but as a fragile balance between conflicting forces, duty and fear, suppression and resistance, control and vulnerability. The background landscape stretches out in rigid geometry, artificial and distant, as if the world beyond the figures does not truly belong to them. It feels like a stage constructed around a confrontation, an external shell built around an internal conflict. Only then does the story return to its source. the legend of St. George, the knight who defeats a dragon to save a doomed city. A tale of faith conquering terror, righteousness overcoming darkness. But here, in this rendering, that certainty dissolves. The dragon does not collapse into wickedness. It writhes like a creature fighting for its last fragment of existence. The knight does not radiate glory. He steadies himself as someone carrying a burden he cannot refuse. The maiden does not embody relief. She stands like a soul bracing for whatever comes after survival. The painting becomes a meditation on power stripped of its illusions. Power here does not roar. It trembles slightly, struggles to remain composed, and clings to the fragile structure of control. The spear does not feel like the extension of divine authority. It feels like a line drawn across a boundary that can never truly separate what is human from what is feared. The dragon's defeat does not read as a resolution. It reads as suppression, the forced silencing of something that never fully disappears. The more the eye traces the scene, the more time begins to feel strange. Nothing moves, yet everything feels caught in transition. The split second where identity shifts, where the self fractures, where the world reshapes itself in silence. Time stretches across the space between intention and consequence, holding everyone captive inside a moment that refuses to release them. The painting captures not victory, but suspension. The terrible stillness where fate has already been decided, but reality has not yet caught up. Beneath this stillness lies a quiet undercurrent of guilt, not expressed, not acknowledged, but present in the thin atmosphere surrounding the figures. The knight's control, the dragon's resistance, the woman's endurance, none of them exist without cost. The act may be justified by legend, by faith, by narrative, yet the emotional truth remains unresolved. Violence cannot occur without leaving something unspoken behind, a shadow that lingers long after the scene is over. The painting does not present evil as something external and foreign. It reveals how fear projects itself outward, giving shape to the things we cannot accept within ourselves. The dragon becomes a container for anxiety, chaos, instinct, and desire. The forces society demands be defeated, contained, purified. But the expression in its coiled body suggests that suppression is not erasure. What is silenced remains alive beneath the surface, waiting, aching, resisting the boundaries placed upon it. In contrast, the knight becomes the embodiment of structure, order, and discipline. Yet his posture reveals fragility rather than strength. His control is a performance sustained through effort, not ease. He exists not as an unquestioned hero, but as a figure who must convince himself to remain steady, to continue holding the pose assigned to him. He acts because he has become the role, not because he owns it. The woman's presence deepens the unease. She is neither participant nor observer in the ordinary sense. She stands as the one who absorbs the emotional aftermath, the one who must carry the memory, the silence, the invisible wound left behind by the event. Her stillness is not passive, it is burdened. It carries the ache of witnessing something that changes not only the world, but the self. The scene does not ask the viewer to choose sides. It does not ask for admiration or condemnation. Instead, it invites a recognition that all three figures exist within the same fragile psychological space. Fear trying to control what it does not understand, instinct refusing to surrender, and conscience standing silent in the middle, unable to stop what must unfold. As the gaze finally pulls away, the confrontation remains unresolved, even though the outcome appears certain. The spear will drive forward, the creature will fall, the figure on the horse will steady himself. The woman will continue to stand alone in the quiet aftermath. And yet the painting does not release the moment into a conclusion. It holds you there, suspended at the threshold, aware that triumph does not arrive cleanly, that survival does not erase fear, that order does not silence what it seeks to destroy. It leaves you with the unsettling sense that the real battle does not end when the dragon collapses. It continues in silence, inside the ones who remain.